OPS is going to play fall sports in spring?
That feels like a long way to go. um, you know, I guess I look at it a couple different things. The plan or the talked about kind of plan right now is to start on March 1st with a 5 week fall season in the spring. Uh, each each just football wise, each football team would play 2 games, so they'd practice for 3 weeks leading up to the 2 games, and like Central would play Burke and North. But there's a lot of holes you could punch in that plan. One is they would have to get NSAA approval, or a change of the NSAA bylaws to allow kids to play multiple sports in a season. Right now, Nebraska is a state that doesn't allow that. Also, just thinking logistically here. So Omaha South has a really good soccer team. So does Omaha Bryan. So who gets the practice time on the turf field right after school? Is that the football team or the soccer team? Or do they rotate days? Like, who's the team that's going to practice at 7 o'clock at night to start their practice under the
Or
light?
who's the team that's going to start practicing at 6 a.m. before school?
Right. Like, what does that look? What do those logistics look like? Here's another thing, and I just take Central for example. So Omaha Central is really good at basketball normally, right? So what happens in mid-March, 2 weeks into this practice, fall sports practice in the spring? Well, the state boys basketball tournament is in mid-March. Omaha Central's head football coach is also their top assistant as a basketball coach. So how does he split his time? Likely it's not, feasible to split his time unless they find a way to practice after school. And Central is one of those schools that only has one full court, so they need to go and practice at middle schools and other places. Anyway, so, and then you throw fall sports on top of it. Also, a handful of assistant football coaches at Omaha Central are assistant boys basketball coaches, not just their head coach, Jay Landstrom. So how do you coach both sports at the same time? I mean, that part's not really that hard. But when you're getting ready for a state championship or state tournament, you likely want all hands on deck. Another one is Omaha North boys basketball coach, is head boys basketball coach, is an assistant football coach. How do you do that? Like, you have those things. And another kind of thing that I thought of is when it comes to how do you do a cross country and a track season at the same time? The training is two totally different things, totally opposite things, because cross country is a 5K or 3.1 miles, and you're putting a lot of miles on your body to train for that. Well, track is a distance runner, and track is a 2 mile or a 1600, or sometimes they run the 800 or 4x8, and sometimes maybe even the 400. So that's a whole different set of training. Well, also, if you have a cross-country meet where you run 3.1 miles on a Tuesday and it's Thursday, Friday, or Saturday when a track meet happens, and that same athlete normally is your best 2-miler or 3,200 and your best 1,600 runner, and maybe runs an 800, how does the body recover in a day or two after? We're talking about high school athletes here, not Olympians, that can likely do that. So those are some of the concerns, and things that just, I don't think maybe were fleshed out before this plan kind of was in place. And there's still time for that plan, to those things to get fleshed out. But those are kind of just off the top of my head, the first thing I thought of were those things. How does this happen? How does this make sense to do, multiple sports? And one, the NSAA board is going to have to likely approve a bylaw in order for this to happen, or pass a new bylaw or an adjustment to the bylaws, which I don't know if they're going to be down for that.
And even if they do pass it, you're likely asking a bunch of volleyball, football players to decide between track or volleyball. And the other thing that I thought of while you're talking is, okay, what about golf? You're
Right.
you're going to have a bunch of boys and girls golf teams at the same time
Yeah.
trying to split time on courses.
Right. That doesn't make a lot of sense with the people. And I mean, the track and football thing, that can be, if you're a lineman and you're a thrower in track, that can be done. That's not as hard, right? Or a high jumper and a wide receiver. I mean, you probably likely don't need to practice as much. But again, you're training for two separate things. It's not like kids don't do that in the summers, but it just feels like it would be a lot. Does Devin Jackson, who's a really good track athlete, does he, if the NSAA doesn't pass a bylaw, he's going to have to choose between playing a 5-week season and running track? Well, he's really, really good at track too, along with football. Likely a state championship contender in multiple events on the track. He's going to have to choose. Deshaun Woods is another guy that's a thrower that is, going to compete for a state championship as shot put, disc, stuff like that. What does he do? Does he decide, well, the 5-week thing isn't worth it? There's just so many kind
The
of
other thing to me, that if we're talking about recovery time and we're worried about college athletes playing a shorter spring season, why aren't we worried about that for athletes in spring playing a 5-week football season or a 5-week volleyball season, and then jumping right into summer weightlifting programs and 7-on-7 and volleyball camps? And where's the why aren't we worried about where's the recovery time for them?
softball, baseball. Like if let's say you're a really good baseball player and you're your school's best pitcher. Well, how do you, and you're the starting quarterback or play football. Well, how does that work? Like, how do you play a baseball game in the afternoon and a football game at night? Which, I mean, that's a lot of throws on a shoulder and different things like that. So, volleyball is a little different because they play just a ton of club, but that bumps into the spring. The spring is club volleyball season. And, I know a handful of club volleyball coaches, and they're not likely to back down to missing club volleyball for high school stuff in the spring when it's not necessarily generally their season. One way they could actually get it done, if the NSA doesn't approve it, is just call it intramurals. But then again, I mean, you're not competing for anything but a city championship really anyway. I don't know. I mean, I just don't think – I don't anticipate the NSA is going to make that change. I just don't.
And this isn't to poo-poo the idea at all, because as you
Right.
know and I know and everyone knows, there are a bunch of OPS athletes in all sports who are champing at the bit to play right now.
Yeah. Like and they're transferring and moving and all of that too. So, I mean, that stuff has happened. We kind of tried to warn people that it was going to happen if they didn't play fall sports. And Sam Scott was at Omaha North. Um, he's probably likely the best OPS senior football player, and he's now transferred to Omaha Skutt so he could play football for his senior year. So Omaha North loses out, right? Or here's another question: like, does a kid like that, like Sam maybe, or others that have transferred, do they get to go back to the school they were at and play in a spring again? Like, is that going to be allowed to happen?
Or if a junior jumps schools and plays in the fall with his new team, and then if he wants to jump back to his original team the next fall,
Yeah,
he's jumping back and
I
forth
mean,
between schools.
there's a lot of those kind of questions. I do think there has been some talk about the juniors that have left. They come back for their senior year to their original school. That's been a conversation, but we'll see. I guess am I confident the plan will work? No. There's just too many kind of what ifs right now to get it done.